Yeah, can you see?
We can.
Can you still see?
Yeah, can still see. Bit of a white screen with a man with a hand over his face.
Right, good. Okay.
Over to you.
Nice, thanks, Alex. Sorry about the technical hiccup. So yeah, my name is Damon Macklin. I head up product at Tally. Tally is a challenger bank, like your Monzos, your Starlings, your Revoluts of the world, but with a slight twist. It's a challenger currency as well. Our challenger currency that we refer to it as is a currency that is tied to the physical ownership of gold, real physical gold, stored in a vault in Switzerland. Unlike fiat currencies, i.e. pounds, euros, dollars, Tally is an asset-based currency. And as you're all probably aware, gold is a very good storer of value. I'm not really here to talk about the product, but I just wanted to give you a bit of understanding about what it is that we build. Like many other businesses, we're an incredibly small team. In fact, our product team is made up of 4 people, and our wider team, the whole business, is about 10 people. And the way our product works is that we consume third-party APIs and render the banking functionality directly in the front end of the app. So kind of what's the problem with startups? Well, lots of ideas coming from various people in the business. So how do you manage that? Limited resource, so not a lot of budget to hire lots of developers. So how do you make the most of that? And then lots of pivoting in different directions and changes in requirements. So kind of we could put a spin on that that's positive and put it in a positive light. So the beauty of startups is lots of ideas from really enthused individuals within the business, limited resource, but it means that we can work more efficiently and economically. And then pivoting in direction can be a good thing because we're agile enough to do so. And we're here to talk about agile. So what does it take to unlock agility? Well, you need to be able to prioritize. You need to deliver something of value. You need to keep making progress and not stall. And most importantly, I believe you need to communicate. So let's dig deeper into each of these. So what does it mean to prioritize? All startups face this. It's a common issue. We simply have too much to do and not enough time to do it. We've got huge visions from the CEO and other individuals in the business, and they all want to achieve everything now. So we need to understand what the priorities are, not just for the business, but most importantly for our customers. This is determined by, sorry, I just got to mute my presenter view. It's determined by asking the question, this feature, this large idea, this piece of functionality, who are we building it for? And how much value is it bringing? So every business has big ambition, but how do we deliver that with a small team? We need to take those large ticket items, break them down into deliverable chunks. How long will they take? Who needs to be involved? Not just focusing on deliverable in time and effort, but delivering in value for the customer. Will this deliver value for them? And we need to keep moving, so progress, not just procrastinate and wonder if we've done good enough. How do we define good enough? What is good enough? Is good enough minimal viable? How do we define that? People bandy around the term minimal lovable. How do we determine that? We need to stop tickets sticking in lanes, blocked by other requirements that haven't been delivered on. As a product manager, my job is to unblock this and facilitate conversation to make things move. And lastly, I need to remove all distractions. So people in the wider team will want to talk to developers, especially when you're a small team. You know, we're a team of 10 and people are often popping up in Slack, speaking to one of the dev guys saying, hey, is there any chance you could do just do a quick extract into CSV for database? It's all well and good, but we need to make sure that it's not distracting from what the ultimate goal is. And then lastly, communication. And I think it's probably the most important thing. So we run daily stand-ups, get the team to talk openly about blockers, why they can't do something, even if it's them that's blocking it. If they're just not able to, you need to try and bring that out in the developer to try and have that conversation openly and say, you know what, it's not a problem that you're not able to deliver this, but you know, what is causing the blocker? And then I talked about this before, but facilitation. It's the PM's job to make sure the devs can work efficiently, especially in remote times where, you know, we're all working at home And so I'm having to facilitate conversation between 3 different developers to make sure that they're all delivering on what they want, on what they need, and what I need, and what the business needs, but also making sure that they're giving each other what they need. And then lastly, show and tell. Make sure all the team know what's being worked on. At Tally, we run an all hands 3 times a week. We're doing this during this remote time as well. There's 10 of us in total, so it works really well. But it's a great way for us to be able to show and tell the business what it is we're working on. So I can hear you shouting, like, you haven't really mentioned Agile or Scrum too much yet. And this is kind of what this is about. So let's look at how it's done in larger orgs, larger organizations. So
Damon, sorry, if I could just jump in there. Sorry to interrupt. Have you changed any slides as of yet? Because all we can see at the moment is just page 1. Excuse me if I'm jumping the gun, but
I've changed
not had any slides being.
Oh, that's such a shame. I've changed loads of slides.
No problem.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll just keep talking.
Keep talking and we can share the slides at the end.
We share the slides at the end, that's fine. So, you know, how does it work in larger organizations? Well, you'd have a product owner, and they would own the product backlog. And they would then, let me just screen through because I can't see. It's weird. I thought they were changing. That's a shame. Let me just keep going through. So you'd have a product owner, and the product owner would own that product backlog. They would set up a sprint planning meeting, and the team would be involved in the sprint planning, and that would move on to a sprint backlog, and the team would be involved in the sprint backlog and contributing to what goes into the sprint. And then you'd have a Scrum Master, and the Scrum Master would run Scrum for, daily Scrum, 24 hours, daily Scrum, maybe that's 1 to 4 weeks, maybe it's a 2-week sprint, whatever it might be. And then you have something deliverable and you ship it, and then you do a sprint review and you do a sprint retrospective. Kind of at Tally, it's an entirely different beast. Fine, we have a product manager, that's myself. Sure, we have a product backlog, but we kind of do things slightly differently because we're a small team and because we can move very quickly. We start by sizing with the dev team straight away. We have things that we want to get done. How long is it going to take us to do? Is it completely outside the realms? And that turns into a bit more of an ideation. Yeah, we could do that, but actually if the ultimate goal is to do this, then we need to break this down into smaller chunks and then deliver that over a period of 3 weeks, maybe a period of 6 weeks. And then that goes to prioritization, and the prioritization is done between myself and the CEO and other people potentially in the business if they have things they're representing. And from there, this goes into the sprint backlog. And because we only have 3 developers, we cram a lot in, but we have a very good idea about the velocity and how those guys work. And then the product team crack into it for 2 weeks. But the product team isn't just a bunch of developers. It's the designer, which is normally myself. It's potentially the founder, and we're all involved. And it works like a well-oiled machine, because what you need from developers at Tally, what we need is developers that have the customer in mind. So they're almost like user experience designer developers who are always thinking about, that's not bad, but hey, what about this for the customer? And this is what the customer's going to experience. And of course, they can bring their technical knowledge to the table and say, that's gonna cause massive load time issues or whatever it might be. And then we run daily Scrum in the same way. And that is where everyone contributes in a daily stand-up, and we are able to communicate in that environment to be able to move things along. And then we've got the finished article that's ready to ship. But most importantly, it doesn't end there. We come back again and we optimize. So last point I want to leave you on is, for me, I think that agility is the incremental delivery of customer value. And by that, I mean you have to be able to be agile enough to be able to put your customer first and deliver on what they need, then gradually improve it and optimize as you go. Gathering feedback from your customers is key, understanding what drives them, and you'll be able to build better products in an agile way. That's it for me. Thanks for listening. I'm Damon Macklin, head of product at Tally, and you can go download, check out the app, and I hope you enjoyed what I had to say. Cheers.
Damon, thank you very much. Yeah, shame about the slides, but don't worry. You know, if it's okay with you, and there's no sort of sensitivity issues, then you know we can share them with on the Agile London meetup page, and you know we'll get those sorted.
Absolutely fine. Yeah, no problem.
A couple of questions have come in, but like I said, I'll ask them to both you and Nancy at the end, and you know we will go from there. So Nancy, over to you with an introduction to strategy sprints.
Awesome. Hey everyone, I'm just gonna go ahead and share my screen. If you can just please in the chat say if you can see it or not, or a thumbs up because I can see your faces.
We can.
Cool. So hi everyone, I'm Nancy, and I am here because I love seeing teams become the all blacks of their industry. So whatever industry that is, whether you are in fintech, rec tech, retail, any type of tech, or even a non-tech, I think if your team can become the all blacks of their industry, then that's a pretty epic thing to aspire to. So a couple of things about me. I'm a former founder of a recruitment tech startup called Hacktopia. I am a public speaker and I've spoken at various tech events. I've got the gift of the gab, apparently, that's what my parents say. So I decided to channel that energy and start a podcast called Better, Faster, and Happier. And that's where I talk with various guests, whether they are therapists to head of product to CTOs, about what they're doing to create better teams, faster responses to change, and happier environments. I also really love challenging people around their purpose. So, behold, my background is in Agile coaching. Now, a couple of things to set the expectation. I love Gifs, so you will see them here. I am dyslexic, so that post was meant to say posted Addict. And I'm a bit of a dad joke connoisseur. So if I drop a couple of bad jokes, please do me a pleasure and laugh. And I am also a strategy geek. So a long, long time ago, or more like in a pre-COVID-19 world, I was sipping some really nice champagne and lobster. And no, I'm not rich. It's just sometimes you like to support yourself. In London, and I was talking with a couple of ladies about what happens when someone from an executive team runs because they've got an amazing idea and they're running to you with a strategy. Now, I think for me, this is quite triggering because as we were talking, it made me realize that a lot of the product people that I've worked with, just a lot of people, even from CTOs to founders of startups, and I myself have made that mistake as well, is you get this idea of excitement and then you run towards your team saying, we're gonna build this right now. But then there's one person who asks why, and that starts to happen because no one has to answer, right? So then what do? I start to search. Hey, does anyone know what we're trying to achieve here? And that usually then actually leads me on to searching for more stuff. And then I land onto a Confluence page, which was lastly updated, not 2 hours ago, as you see on this drawing, but about 6 months ago with what is meant to be the strategy. Now, the thing is, what I've understood from strategy and what I coach, strategy is about channeling time, energy, and money into the future that you are intentionally trying to create. And I think sometimes we forget that. We forget that strategy isn't just this thing that sits on a Confluence page and has a bunch of KPIs. It is actively a creative process of trying to design what the world would look like, and then actively, intentionally putting all of your energy, money, and effort to achieve that. And that starts to then, it goes a bit beyond purpose as well. Strategy talks about where to play and how to play. And what I mean with that is, let's say we are a food small business. We've decided that we're going to play in the British market and we're going to play through cost. And what we mean with cost is that we're going to go for being the cheapest on the market. And that starts to make really informed decision about the team who are building the product. And I think sometimes we forget to provide that context to both teams, whether you are an engineering team or a product team or a startup, because how you decide to play and where you decide to play makes a lot of helps you make a lot of informed decisions about the features you build, how quickly you build them, how often you build them. So a couple of principles that I think that you take into account when you're thinking about strategy is that together alone. And what I mean with that is you get the group together alone to create strategy collectively. So strategy should not be something that is created in some sort of offsite with one individual in a fancy room, but it should really be a collective effort. Number two, strategy should be focusing about creating tangible stuff over theoretical conversations. So I know that's slightly weird because I said it's about designing the future, but I really think it's about going beyond the theory and really being descriptive about what the future looks like. Is it that you have grown your market share by X amount and you are delighting all, let's look at the example of the food business, and you are delighting all of your, all of the small businesses who are supplying your sausages to their clients. It's really about describing what that future looks like and not being stuck in the theoretical conversation. And then it's also about getting started versus being right. And what I mean with that is you will find a lot of people with strategy, especially when they jump in the theoretical side, it's more about I am right, you're wrong. Instead, what strategy should focus on is that if strategy allows you to, if strategy allows you to start taking actions, then you're in the right way. If strategy makes you focus on having theoretical conversations about being right or wrong, then you're probably not doing strategy. Also, don't rely on creativity. And I know this is a bit of a controversial one. I think sometimes we get too focused on the creative expressing, but it's really about time boxing things and putting pressure on ourselves and making some hardcore decisions. Strategy is, in a sense, a realm of really hard decision making. So I asked myself, what would a strategy sprint look like? And I guess I hope I'm socializing this idea so that some of the teams that you work with can start to do strategy sprints themselves. So it would look like this. It's a 2-day workshop where you define the challenge and with your team look at the art of possibilities. And then on the following day, you vote on which possibilities you want to pursue. And then you start to add a bit more detail around that possibility. So that really goes into the detail as to where to play and how to play. Prototyping day is really about where you get the team to actually turn their strategic possibilities into tangible things that they can test, and that happens on Thursday. And on Friday, you review and then you make a decision. Now, the hypothesis here is that if you can get your team to do sprints, if you can get your team to do strategy sprints, what you start to do is you start to loop them into the wider picture as to what it is they're trying to achieve. For who is it? For everyone. It's not just, strategy is not just something that is for executives. I think it should be something that should be cascaded throughout your entire organization, because what you start to realize that everyone actually has a really unique perspective to bring to the table. Now, if you're interested about getting more into strategy sprints with me, I'm always available to be contacted via LinkedIn. And that was it.
Nancy, thank you very much indeed. Very interesting stuff. Right, I will go straight to questions. So, Damon, one for you. Sure. How do you manage the tickets, tasks, or user stories estimations? In which format?
So, yeah, I probably wasn't clear on that, but yeah, we run Jira. So we run Jira and Confluence. All of our requirements are documented directly in Confluence and linked directly to Jira tickets. And yeah, the way we manage that is to make sure that the requirements are captured in a user story. And someone mentioned user story. So yeah, I mean, the classic is to go, as a user, I want to be able to do this so that I can achieve this or achieve X, Y, Z. And we keep it as simple as that. Like I say, it's an incredibly small team, so it's really just a very top level requirement, and then we break that down accordingly. And the developers and myself will create tickets, subtasks that will break out from that.
Thank you, Nancy. When discussing strategy with people or with an individual, if somebody genuinely and strongly thinks that they are right and you are wrong, how do you handle that from there?
So I think that's about making sure that it's not necessarily you discuss strategy, because I think when you go into a discussion format, it's naturally going to go into a you are wrong or I am right. Whereas if you try to brainstorm around what that strategy could look like, then it's more about people bringing their thoughts to paper. So I think the best thing to do is grab a Sharpie, grab a Post-it note, put it as an open-ended question, and brainstorm around what that looks like. So I hope that gives people a bit of an idea as to how to deflect. So basically, don't have a conversation, have a brainstorming session first, because then you think wide and then you narrow down inwards, which helps when it comes to decision making.
Thank you. One to Damon. Could you give us a little bit more of an insight into Tally, what they actually do, and how we can get involved?
Sure. So, so I started by saying that Tally is a banking app. It is exactly that. It is exactly the same kind of banking experience that you'd expect from any kind of challenger bank, with this added layer of Tally currency. The way that the Tally currency works is that you're avoiding using fiat. And when I say that, fiat currencies are by design essentially a little bit broken, we believe. And the reason why is that it's a devaluing currency. It's not a currency that holds its value over a period of time, whereas gold holds its value. If you were to bank with Tally, then you're gonna make more money for yourself in the long run, and you're gonna actually protect yourself from inflation, and probably at this time protect yourself from quantitative easing. Obviously, at times like this is where you really start to see the value of gold. So yeah, essentially what you get with Tally is you get a banking experience where you can spend gold, and the gold is in the form of Tally, which is our currency.
Thank you. Nancy, how much should or does company culture play into strategy work?
Now, I think, sorry, my instant thought is that it goes hand in hand, because it really, so if you are a cutthroat culture, it's going to be reflected in your strategy. I think if culture influences everything, so it doesn't matter if you're talking about strategy or what sandwich should we order for our group meeting, culture plays a part in that. I think the main things that you should be thinking about when it comes to, it's not, is culture reflected? It's more, is the purpose and our mission reflected in our strategic direction? I would say if those two things aren't reflected, then you might want to think about whether or not your purpose is still fit for purpose. Funny enough, that's using the same word twice. But anyways, I hope that makes sense.
Thanks, Nancy. Damon, do you have any tips to remain agile with multiple executives on technical projects which isn't their speciality?
It's a really good question. Can I just say no? No, probably not. No, I do. So just repeat the question again for me, just so I want to make sure I answer this succinctly.
Do you have any tips to remain agile with multiple executives on technical projects which isn't their speciality?
So I think the thing you need to do is you need to, I'm a big believer in this, and this, some people might not agree with this, but I think you need to protect your developers. You know, as a product manager, my job is to make sure that, yes, we're delivering on the requirements for the customer, but you know, obviously there's going to be requirements from the business directly. I think it's all about, it really comes down to communication. If you've got executives in the business that are entirely not aware of what's going on, then it sounds like communication is not happening effectively. And if it's the executives think that they might know better, which can absolutely happen. You know, I've been in situations where you're in a meeting with an executive, you know, who might be a board member. It might be just a board meeting, and you're presenting an idea or a concept or potentially where you're heading, and someone says, yeah, do you know what, like at this other business that I work with, this is how we run things. Well, you're not running it like that. And they are kind of stubborn on that fact. I think it's all about just being confident in that you have all of the research around you. to be able to deliver a succinct answer to them to say, this is why we're doing X, Y, Z. And then, going back to my point around protecting the developers, they're there to be able to produce. Obviously, you want them to input, and you absolutely need their input. But at the end of the day, they're there to help you deliver this thing, and they're not there to be, I guess, trying to put together business cases for why you would do something, and then feeding that back to an executive. I hope that answers the question.
I thought it did. To Nancy, could you give more insight into the role and contribution of the target audience / customer in the strategy conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. So you would bring your customers in at the very beginning, and this would be called the expert interview. And I think the main trick here is to make sure that the person who interviews your customer isn't actively involved in building the prototypes. The reason why is just to kind of there's a conflict of interest there. So for example, if I was to come in and run a strategy sprint for your team or your startup, we would bring in on board a customer. And obviously before the strategy sprint has run, we would have figured out who your customer is and what are the kind of key things you're really trying to find out. And I think that what's interesting here is as the person who's interviewing, so let's say me is interviewing the customer, you and the team sits around and starts to take down notes and learnings and insights that you're taking from the customer. I think what's really interesting about taking this approach is that you're not just relying on one-dimensional personas which are expired as soon as they're written down on paper, but you're actually having the customer in your presence for the first time, and that increases empathy and context. And all of that insight is really useful when you come into prototyping, because you've heard it from the horse's mouth. You've heard what the customer wants. You've heard their challenges. And I think it's also a really interesting way to actually bring out, let's say, your existing strategy, the strategic direction of your team. If you wanted to test it out, bringing your customer at the beginning of that sprint and really asking them questions is a really great way to bring them in. So yeah, if you can bring your customers in at the very beginning, do. If you can get someone else to interview them, even better, because then that allows the team to really focus on taking notes and learning and observing. So I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Nancy. Damon, what is your best resources about Agile that you'd recommend to someone new to it? So books or courses, things like that. And then there's another one to you, Damon, so I'll give you the chance to answer them both. Have you seen an increase in the number of new customers due to COVID?
Cool, yeah. So luckily enough, I was on holiday last year. Doesn't look like that's going to happen this year. But the book that I read last summer was The Art of Doing, what was it called? The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time, which was a Jeff Sutherland book that if anyone hasn't read it, I definitely recommend it. It's always my go-to. And it's all about how to run Scrum, but it gives such a different view on how you might do it, and actually, looks at the broader spectrum of Scrum and says, do you know what? Like, the ways in which you could do it are X, Y, Z, A, B, C. The whole point of Agile is that you make it fine. There's some very basic principles there, but you utilize those principles in the way that fits your team. Fits the business and fits on what you're trying to deliver. And that's a really key point. And so, yeah, I'd really recommend that Jeff Sutherland book. And then the second question, was that about how Tally's doing during this time?
Yeah, so not just how Tally's doing, but, people might feel that their money is safer and better invested with into something like Gold or through Tally. Yeah. And, in light of that, have you seen an increase in onboarding new customers?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yes, we have. In fact, it's been reported that a lot of the other challenger banks are struggling in the banking sector, and financial technology sector generally is not struggling, but there's definitely a downturn in number of signups, and also downturn in usage of their cards, obviously, whether that's virtual or physical, certainly physical. And actually, yeah, on the back of this, we are seeing an increase, and that's a great thing. You wouldn't want to it's kind of like a perfect storm for us. You know, on one hand, it's dreadful what's happening, and you know, it's incredibly serious, and it's important that we don't lose sight of that as a business. But yeah, if we're talking about how well the business is doing on the back of this, then yeah, this is what Tally is all about. It's all about protecting your money during times like this, but also during, you know, during boom times. You know, the '08 crash has opened up. I think someone mentioned the '08 crash in the chat. The '08 crash has opened up consumers' minds to potentially other financial avenues for themselves, whether that's crypto or whether that's looking at alternatives to high street banks. Tally is just is another one of those that sits in there that we think enhances customer experience to a greater degree. If you want to save, then saving with Tally is you're going to be far better off saving with Tally in the long run than you would be saving in pounds. And we think that beats every other banking proposition that's out there. So yeah, in short, yeah, we're experiencing some really good customer numbers coming through. But yeah, it's a good thing, but it's also awful what's happening. And I think we need to make sure we don't lose sight of all the bad stuff that's happening as well.
Thanks, Damon. Question for Nancy. What artifacts do you produce from a strategy sprint?
So you would produce your 2-year goal. You then also produce a range of strategic kind of bets, and I call those kind of experiment cards. And what that's useful is that if you've executed one strategy and you're not sure about what else to do, you can always go back to the ones that you've tested out in the strategy sprint itself. You get a summary deck, which is just filled with really, so you know how I spoke about you testing out. So there's a testing day in the strategy sprint. That day is purely focusing on learning as much as you can. So you get a summary document, which has all of the learnings in that, let's say 10-pager documentation. Sorry, COVID time, people in the house. So you get those documentation. So sorry, school of thought, my trail of thought lost. So you get your 2-year goal, you get a list of kind of strategic possibilities, and you get a documentation, which would be a summary of all of this testing that had happened on the Thursday. And those 3 documents then allows people to make an informed decision on the Friday. And obviously there are a range of activities itself that take place during the week. And all of those activities can have just like really great summary notes that people can come back to. So you would let's say you would take pictures of all of those Post-it notes and collate them all together in a document.
Thank you. Damon, you talked about the product role in your company, but at the tactical level. How much time should be at the strategic level? Or to ask in another way, how much of time should be product management and how much product ownership?
I don't think you can divide the two in two. I think you need to, when you're in a small business, you wear many hats. So I'm not just a product manager, I'm not just a product owner, I'm also a UXer. Sometimes I'm a UI designer, sometimes I'm a visual designer for marketing. It really is spread, and I don't think you can divide the two. And I think that applies to, even if you're just in a pure product role or just a pure product manager role, you should be at all times trying to strategically think about your customer, think about your market. You should be at all times managing your team. You know, these need to be front and center. It's just kind of part of the role. I don't think you can divide them 60-40, 30, 70. I think you need to be able to say, I'm across this. That's my job.
Brilliant. Thank you. So this is a question to you both. So I'll, both feel free to chip in. In a large organisation with rigid processes, in a highly political environment, do you have any recommendations, tips, or possible books that one could refer to 1, help understand, educate, and 3, execute a transition from waterfall to agile effectively? So I think, in short, in a large organisation with rigid processes and highly political environments, Do you have any recommendations to execute a transition from waterfall to agile effectively? So I have a question to you both. Nancy, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I think number one, it's to find your allies. And then number two is to find, I don't want to say the word enemies, but let's call them that for the sake of it. And then find out what motivates them. Because quite often I think sometimes, and I've done this mistake as well, where you come in blaring your agile trumpet and saying this is going to change the world, but there is a human empathy where while that world is changing, people are losing something. They're grieving a loss. And I think sometimes being empathetic towards that is the best way to win them over. And I think in terms of books, I'll be honest, I've read quite a fair amount of books and no one has got it right. And there's almost an acceptance where you need to realize that you will tread on some toes, you will annoy some people. But I think if you can show your intent, I think it's about showing your intent first. If you can show your intent and people, it's like a muscle memory. People have been practicing this old way for the longest of time. And through that muscle memory, they've built in some value. And I think that is something that sometimes, as much as we blare Agile is great, we forget that in the old world, people have delivered some value and letting go of that is a really scary place to be in. So it's almost about showing them that there's more value and better value to be made, doing things differently. So those are some of the tips that I would say. So accept that you will fail in some areas, accept that you won't win everyone over. Read some books if they make you feel great. Read psychological books because they really give you an insight into the way how people think. And really you're changing mindsets and hearts and all of the visible stuff around, do we put things on post-it notes or Jira boards are kind of like the easy things, if that makes sense. So that's my take.
And Damon?
Yeah, Nancy, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the biggest thing that you said was about empathy. I think, you know, you've got to take almost like a user experience approach to this. Is you're coming in, whether it's new, whether you're coming in new and trying to implement agile processes that you've used yourself before, or whether it's entirely new to the business, you've got to be empathetic to the people that you're trying to bring with you. You know, you're trying to win hearts and minds of individuals. And, you know, people are protective of what they know and what they've done. I've you know, often heard that classic phrase, no, well, I did it like this before and there was no problem. You know, you're trying to encourage people to run a completely different process to what they want. And actually you're trying to potentially enforce process on people that, you know, they just don't want. They don't want more process. They just want better ways of working. And I think if you can wrap it up as that and bring them with you on the journey, then you're onto a winner. The last thing I'd say is that it's much like, I think it's very like trying to convince a stakeholder of moving in a certain direction and arguing your point to an extent. And that is to try and convince people that it's actually almost their idea, and actually doing it this way would be a really stupid thing to do. Because don't they agree that actually this is better? You know, trying to get them on board via encouraging them to take ownership of it and make it feel like it's their thing that they're going to roll out across the business has worked for me. Hopefully that helps to explain.
So I just want to, really quickly add to that. Really great stuff, Damon. I think as well, what you can do is with whoever the person or group of people are that you are slightly worried about them not buying this agile agenda, is to collectively sit with them and brainstorm about the problems that exist in the current environment, and then start to use some of the techniques that you've learned in this new way of working to solve those problems. Because I think it's the same way how before you buy a pair of shoes or before you buy a $10,000 new car, you want to be convinced as well that this is worth investing in. And this is the the same decision-making mentality that we apply in all aspects of our life. So take that mindset, bring the group of people in and start to brainstorm. And maybe if you even did a strategy sprint and start to think about, okay, what are the existing challenges that exist in this environment? What would it look like in 2 years' time if we could think about an ideal perfect scenario? What happens is that you actually have a common purpose and a common goal as to what it is you're trying to realize. And therefore Agile is not the end, but it's a means to an end, if that makes sense. I hope that gives people a couple of kind of practical things they could do.
Thanks, Nancy. And that concludes Agile or Remote Agile London for this week. So special thanks and big thanks to Damon and Nancy, two great talks. Slides will be up from Damon. I'll make sure people get visibility of those. The recording of this will be on YouTube within 24, 48 hours. Lots of great questions. Thanks to everyone again for joining. If you do want to get involved and speak at one of our Agile London events or another event, just message me, let me know. I'm not that difficult to find. We're really keen to keep these running. It's challenging times for everyone at the moment. On the flip side, Oliver Bernard do still have 1 or 2 clients that are relatively busy and hiring. So if you are looking for work, just reach out to one of us. We're very, very keen to help everyone and keep the wheels spinning at the moment. As I say, help everyone we can. Hope to see everyone next Wednesday. Thanks again, Nancy. Thanks again, Damon. Have a good evening, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks. See you, everyone.
Thank you.